All right, let's talk about anime. We all know it, many of us love it. But the story of how it became this global powerhouse, well, that's something else entirely. It's this wild 50-year-plus journey of struggle, genius, and ultimately world domination. And trust me, it's probably not the story you're expecting.
So that's the big question we're tackling, right? How did this art form, which was a pretty small-time domestic industry for so long, completely overshadowed by the big guys in the West, turn into the cultural titan we all know today? How on earth did that happen? Let's get into it.
Okay, so to really understand this, we've got to go way, way back, right to the very beginning. Back to a time before anime was even really a thing. It was just a handful of artists kind of experimenting, creating what they called manga films.
And man, those early days were rough. I mean, the first animations pop up around 1917, but from the get-go, it was just a constant uphill battle. It was way more expensive to produce than Western cartoons, and they were always playing catch-up with tech like sound and color. And then, as if that wasn't enough, the great Kanto earthquake hits in 1923 and just levels Tokyo. The entire industry basically had to start over from scratch. It all leads up to the first-ever feature-length anime in 1945, which turned out to be war propaganda. A pretty rocky start, to say the least.
You'd think after the war things might get a little easier, right? Nope. The Allied occupation forces actually tried to bring about 100 animators together. The idea was to create films that praised democracy. But the whole project just completely imploded. The reason? Well, these artists were fiercely independent, super territorial, and just could not seem to agree on anything. The idea of a unified industry looked like a total pipe dream.
But then, one man sees a Disney movie, and he gets an idea. An idea so ambitious, it was going to change the course of animation history in Japan forever.
This was the mission, simple as that, to become the Disney of the East. After seeing Disney's Snow White, the president of the Toei Company, Okawa Hiroshi, was so blown away that in 1956, he founded the studio Toei Doga with that one single massive ambition.
So here's where it gets really interesting. They couldn't just copy the Disney model. I mean, they studied it, the big budgets, the assembly line production. But this was post-war Japan. There was just no way they could afford that. So they got creative. Instead of a high-budget model, they went with a high-labor model. They hired the most brilliant, outstanding young talent they could find and paid them next to nothing.
But, well, this Disney of the East plan started to fall apart pretty fast. As Japan's economy recovered, wages started to rise, and Toei's profits just vanished. At the same time, fewer people were going to the movies, and these intense labor disputes kept erupting. And get this, leading the union efforts were a couple of young animators named Takahata Isaro and Miyazaki Hayao. Yep, the future founders of Studio Ghibli. The whole system was a ticking time bomb.
This crisis at Toei basically forced a complete paradigm shift. It sparked a revolution. And this revolution didn't start in a big, fancy movie theater. Nope, it started on the small screen, right in people's living rooms. The year 1963. This is the turning point. This is when Fuji Television aired the very first 30-minute animated TV series, Tetsuwan Atomu, or, as most of the world knows it, Astro Boy. It was a massive, massive hit, and it completely changed the game.
And here's the absolute genius of it. Astro Boy's creator, the legendary Tezuka Osamu, knew he couldn't afford that expensive Toyo model for a weekly TV show. So he just invented a new one. He ruthlessly cut down the number of drawings, simplified the character designs, and used all these clever tricks, quick cuts, sound effects, to create the illusion of action. And the real kicker? To make up for the low fees from the TV station, he pioneered licensing his characters for merchandise. And that became the new business model for pretty much the whole industry.
So Tezuka's model worked, maybe a little too well. It kicked off this huge anime boom. But this rapid, low-cost expansion brought on a whole new set of problems that, believe it or not, pushed the industry to the brink all over again.
Yeah, what followed in the 1970s was basically a perfect storm. You had global economic crises hitting Japan, you had way too many shows flooding the market, all competing for the same audience, and then the inevitable happened. Major studios, including Tezuka's own, went bankrupt or had to do massive layoffs. The old system just completely collapsed.
But you know, sometimes when everything burns down, something new can grow. And that's what happened here. With the old models broken, creators were forced to innovate. They had to find new audiences. And they did that by starting to tell more complex, more mature stories.
And the definitive proof of this was space battleship Yamato. When it first aired in 1974, it became a genuine social phenomenon. It proved that there was this huge, untapped audience of teenagers and young adults out there who were just hungry for anime that treated them like grown-ups.
So now, with a new, older audience locked in at home and a cost-effective way to make shows, all the pieces were finally in place. Japanese anime was ready to begin its conquest of the world.
You know, the evolution of the word Japanimation pretty much tells the whole story. At first, it was kind of a pejorative term used overseas to criticize anime as being, cheap or too violent. But today, it's a badge of honor. It represents a celebrated and completely unique global art form.
But even with all this incredible global success, the fight isn't over. Back home in Japan, the very industry that creates these worldwide hits is facing a new kind of crisis.
I mean, just look at the pressures they're facing. TV ratings are down, which means ad revenue is down. A dwindling birth rate in Japan means a smaller domestic audience to sell to. And of course, there's just fierce competition for everyone's attention, from video games and mobile apps.
So here's the big, crucial irony. The very studios that are creating these beloved global franchises are often in a really tough spot financially. They're basically working as low-paid subcontractors for the big television networks, just struggling to make ends meet.
Which brings us to our final big question. Anime has survived earthquakes, economic collapse, and creative stagnation by constantly reinventing itself. Facing all the challenges of today, can it find a way to innovate once again? That really is the biggest question for the future of this incredible art form.